Hi everybody, welcome to the show. Today we are with Cory Cannon from Austin, Texas. Hey Cory, thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Can you
Hello.
please
Thank you.
can you please explain to us what you're currently doing? So you're doing a couple of things, right? You're doing a PhD. You're from our military, and you have your own company now. Can you please explain us what you're currently doing?
Yep. So I am a retired major from the United States Army. Where the past 12 years of my 21-year career, I've been doing knowledge management within the Department of Defense Space. Been a knowledge manager for a couple of operations overseas, as well as a knowledge manager here stateside for a couple of military organizations. Besides that, working on a Ph.D. program through Bangkok University, which I should be finished with that hopefully by June of 2022 or 2023, depending on how the research goes. And then I've also started up my own knowledge and innovation management consulting business here in Texas, mainly trying to get contracts with government agencies in terms of how to get their knowledge, their internal knowledge, a little bit more utilized for their organization.
All right. Okay, Cory, first question for you that I would like to ask. So you have experience in knowledge management. How do you think, what is your opinion about the remote work? So currently with the COVID, we've seen a bunch of people working remotely from home or from different places, not the office. How do you think this impact knowledge management?
So I think this is the time for knowledge management to really shine for their organizations. What I mean by that is not many organizations out there has had a remote work or a telework policy out there, or how to get information from their companies out to their employees if they had to work remotely. During this period of time, this gives those companies an opportunity to say, hey, what should our policies be? What type of network configuration do we need to have? Work with our IT folks with that. What type of procurement do we need? Do we need to provide all of our employees with computers, with particular software packages, or what type of environment do they need to work in to be able to do their jobs that we hired them on to do? So I think this is the time to actually set up a knowledge management strategy for these organizations, enable them to say, hey, if we are working a remote status, here are the policies that are going to be in place for these remote status piece. If we're working in the office, this is what we're looking at for in the office type of work. So I think this is the time for knowledge managers to shine.
All right. So it's definitely not something knowledge manager are scared of. It's really something they embrace. Right.
This is something they should embrace.
All right. So we're lucky to have you because you've got experience in the military for many years, and now you're helping private companies. What are the things that, what are the main difference between the military and the public sector and the private sector when it comes to knowledge management? Have you seen very big differences?
Well, there's a lot of differences in terms of definitions of what the public sector considers knowledge management and the military sector considers knowledge management. That's what I'm finding out kind of the hard way on this. So within the military, knowledge management actually gets into decision-making processes, process improvement, change management, innovation management, as well as user interface with their collaboration sites, that type of thing. When you're dealing with more the private side or the public sector side of the house, you're dealing more with what I call more content management or curation of knowledge, is what they're calling their knowledge managers a lot of times. Not so much into the decision space or the change management space. It's more the information and document curation for that company.
All right. So when it comes to technology, for instance, did you see a lot of differences between the public and the private? Or, practice, I understand it's different. But when it comes to tech.
So in terms of technologies, not really that much difference, in my opinion, from the two. One of the things, probably more so in the public side and the military side, is that the dependency on the technology is probably greater on the private side of the house than it is on the military side of the house.
Okay, and I have to ask, who is the worst when it comes to knowledge management? Would you say the military are way ahead, or?
I think in terms of what I call a maturity model, I would say that between military and public sector, I think the public sector is more mature in terms of their knowledge management model than the private sector in some ways. But in other ways, though, I think military is a little bit of ahead in terms of actually trying to codify outside of the ISO definition of what knowledge management is. But working in the government space, they're actually working on a definition for government workers currently, and having an entire job series dedicated for knowledge management. That is one thing that I would have to say, at least government-wide, not just military, but government-wide, is actually working on right now, is developing that type of career field within the government space. Even though that we've been doing it for well over 15 years in the government space, not really having a firm job series or a career path for knowledge managers has not really been established before now.
All right. Would you mind sharing some case studies about your experience in South Korea? If you have some good case study where knowledge management succeeded, and maybe one where it totally failed.
So I would say a huge success story for knowledge management during my time in South Korea would have been the development of the battle rhythm for the three commands that our shop was in charge of looking after. So we had the United Nations Command, the Combined Forces Command, and the United States Forces Korea. All three of those organizations was underneath one four-star general, and our shop, our knowledge management shop, was to help support the commander in his decision-making process. So development of that battle rhythm to set up working groups, planning teams, functional boards, and decision boards to help get topics promoted up to that commander for decision. I think that was the biggest thing that the knowledge management shop did as a huge win for us. Now, in terms of failure, how regime changes and you get one commander in and then the next one comes in, the following commander came in and moved knowledge management from a special staff status to a subjugated staff section underneath the operations cell, which basically what happens is that they turn into more of an ops cell, or dealing more with operations orders rather than dealing with the entire command's decision-making processes. So moving the knowledge management team underneath operations as a dramatic fail is that we lost visibility of those decision points for the command.
So basically moving the organization, the leadership got a very dramatic impact on the knowledge management, the way it's working, depending on where they put it.
Correct.
Interesting. And why? What was the reason? Why did they do that? Because obviously they knew it won't work as much as before.
So it was. So this is my opinion about this. It's not the official stance, but this is my opinion about it, is that there was a misunderstanding of what the general officers said versus what was executed. The verbiage was, we need to operationalize knowledge management for the command. Well, there are several ways you could take that. The way that they chose to take it is that, hey, let's put it underneath operations rather than looking at how to make it more feasible for the command to be able to utilize it in a more effective manner. So that's my take on it. So
okay.
I personally think it was a misunderstanding.
So it's a bit ridiculous then. I mean, if it's misunderstanding, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of sad to hear. But in the end, I mean, it's still the case, or they understand the mistake and they try to fix it, or.
So the last word I had from the people who replaced me over there in Korea is that they're still underneath the operations cell. They're basically waiting their time out to be able to move back into special staff status with a new commander. So that's what's going on right now.
Interesting. So same process, same organization, just different location under a different leadership, and it doesn't work. Okay, interesting.
Right. So
yeah.
I've been in organizations where the knowledge management was underneath the communications cell. I've been in organizations that knowledge management has been in the operations. I've been in organizations that knowledge management was even in human resources. Personally and professionally, the best place to have it is underneath your chief of staff or similar type position within the organization. The reason why I say that is because this way you get the entire breadth of the command or your organization underneath that one individual that's in charge of that staff. Then that way policies, procedures, decision-making, and all those processes can go through one centralized figure, and it's the same throughout the entire organization.
Interesting. Thank you very much for sharing that. I want to ask something a little bit more personal about your story. So you're currently doing a Ph.D. in knowledge management. I wanted to ask, how did you end up in this field? Is it something you were interested in, or you fell in this field by accident? I mean, what's the background story here?
So I've always wanted my Ph.D. And in fact, I got a bachelor's and master's degree in political science, and I figured out, you know what, I need to change things up. So I was looking around for other type of programs out there, and I figured, you know what, I've been doing this knowledge management thing for the Department of Defense, and at that point in time, it was about the 10-year mark. Like, I wonder if you can actually get a PhD in this field. So I was looking around. There was a few universities in the U.S. that was, you know, they were throwing it in with either library science or business or communications, you know, as a subsequent, you know, degree field. Then I started looking around, you know, I was like, well, heck, I'm over here in Korea right now. You know, what type of international schools are there around? Then I received a flyer from the World Bank Group for a organizational knowledge certificate, and they were having it there in Bangkok. Well, I was like, well, you know, just a couple hours flight to Bangkok. You know, let me try this out. And then went to Bangkok University, went through the classes there, spent, I think, solid 2 weeks there, getting these two certifications through the World Bank and Bangkok University, and started talking to Dr. Vincent. And he said, well, we actually have a knowledge and innovation management PhD program. Is that something that you would be interested in? And that's how the conversation started going down that path. So, and I've not looked back since. I really enjoyed my time there, going through the courses and everything, and getting to the point now where I'm actually having to start in on the actual dissertation piece of the research.
Interesting. And I would like to also ask, did you see any change in the way your clients are seeing you since you're doing the PhD? Or, I mean, do you tell them, or how does it work here? Obviously, it's a big plus for you when you try to get new clients, right?
It is a big plus. Letting them know that, yes, I am working on getting my doctorate in this field. That way I become more of a subject matter expert in knowledge and innovation management. So yes, it is a good selling point to have. There are other PhDs out there that deal in knowledge management. They are looking more in the organizational management or industrial organizational management field, but I will be one of the few of actually knowledge and innovation management PhDs actually working in this field.
Okay, interesting. So continuing asking question about your current client, when you work with a new client, what do you see? I mean, the main problem with your clients, is it that they don't use the right techniques? They don't use the right technology? So most of your work is actually dealing with digital new tools to set up those processes, or everything is wrong, like no process, no tool, everything needs to be done. What do you see more often?
So when I go through and look at a new client, I actually take the time and see what type of technologies, tools, processes they have up front. This way I have a greater understanding of where they're at as status quo. Depending on the client, I've seen them where, it needs to be a technology change or process change or even personnel change. I've been involved with one organization to where we just had to move people to different positions within the organization itself, not firing anyone, but be able to move them to different positions where they'd work more effectively. And that's all that needed, is just a position title change, position change, and the organization ran a lot more smooth and a lot more effective. So sometimes it's even just educating the organization on how to utilize their personnel to benefit the organization as a whole.
Okay, and most of your clients, are they big organizations, or I mean, what's the average size here?
The average organization is more of a process change, to where they got to change some processes to work through some of their ineffectiveness.
All right.
Very few. A lot of these organizations do have a lot of tools at their disposal. Sometimes it's just learning on how to use the tools better, though, as well. But more times it's more the process issue than the tool issue.
But those organizations, are there 500 people organization, 10,000 people?
Size.
I mean, size, when it comes to size. Because,
size.
You know better than me, but I guess when you try to share knowledge, it's not the same to share knowledge in a small organization with 50 people and sharing knowledge with an organization of 50,000 people, right? So what type of clients do you have?
So right now, anywhere between 10,000 on up is what I'm working with.
Okay. So have you worked with clients that were smaller, like 100, 200 people? Or it's not something knowledge management, they're not involved?
I have. I've worked with clients as I think 50 was the lowest amount of employees I've worked with. And that one was more the, hey, just move people around and then look at your processes. It's kind of a range, but in terms of clientele, I like to keep that 10,000 plus range in there. But I will work with smaller companies as well, because they need knowledge management just as much as the big guys do.
Yeah. So what's the big difference between a small company and a big one? Is it just the quantity of information and knowledge you have to share, or the process must be adapted as well? What are the main differences?
Between the small and large companies,
Yes.
A lot of it has to do. Okay, so a lot of it has to do with, I would call it dispersion of workforce. When you get to the bigger companies, they tend to have a larger size of corporations that have more offices out and about throughout either the U.S. or internationally, to where they could affect a lot more people. Now, in my personal opinion, the smaller companies have the greatest amount of change since you're dealing with fewer people in typically one or two locations.
Last question for you. So we've been talking about the difference between the private and the public sectors. And in today's world, when it comes to knowledge, so obviously most of the knowledge is done and found inside the company, but very often nowadays people are going on the internet to find some knowledge. Maybe the company does not provide them, and they end up on Google or any other search engine, and they realize there's a lot of information knowledge that is actually paywall protected. Actually, what people say is 90% of the knowledge is actually not accessible. So is that something your organization and yourself try to solve, and how information knowledge on the internet is integrated to your process? Is that something you also take into consideration, or very often everything that is outside a company is not taken into account? I would like your opinion on this question.
Well, considering that the average right now of a person's work, they spend 25% of their time searching for information that they need or that they are looking for. That's a very relevant question. So what I've done in the past, at least within the Department of Defense, they have their own networks and everything, but they also have Google that they can actually look up items as well. Yeah. Now, for being that as an option for businesses in terms of finding for information, the reason why is because not everything they can find within their own organization. And so being able to search and look for information in other places is actually a good thing. Now, I don't think 90% of the information's behind paywalls or anything. I think the percentage of that is actually a lot less. It also depends on how you're looking up the information as well. So, not only do you look at Google and some other web browsers or search engines, but you can also utilize libraries as a prime example. Being able to search libraries for information, that's not really a paywall issue, but being able to
libraries
look
you need to pay, right? You need to pay all those licenses and access to library. So the library themselves pays for those licenses, not the individuals a lot of times, at least here in the United States. I'll preface it as that. At least here in the U.S., they typically do not. The libraries are public libraries, and typically the end user does not pay for access. Yes, correct. So you would rather advise your clients to say, hey, probably you should educate your staff or train your staff to search information in a public library instead of going on the internet. That's what you're saying? Or
No. I'm saying utilize those online sources through the library.
Yeah, sure. So instead of going to Google,
Google's only getting, go to the Library of Congress or something like that, or your local library to look up for those type of articles and everything.
Got it. Yeah. Libraries are a very good source of information. There's a lot of things to find there, and they're not directly accessible from Google. I've never seen that. If you type something, you will not end up on a public library page. The SEO is terrible. So you need to go first to a public library website. So it does. It's definitely part of your process. Outside knowledge is also something you advise your client with.
Right, and sometimes depending on what type of field are they in, being able to get subscriptions to those. Like there was a law firm that needed access to legal cases, that was more local. So told them, hey, why don't you get subscriptions to some of the law journals that are in the area and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So once I turned them on to that, I showed them how to actually link those to their search, to their local search, and they were able to search those legal cases right from their own portal, just by doing some integration of.
Okay. Yeah. So we've been talking about buying databases, getting access to very expensive databases. So when you work with a client in knowledge management, how do you price those this work? I mean, is there any indicators or KPI to see if you're doing a good work and then the return on investment is good for a client? How do you get numbers out of that? Is there a way to work effectively with a client? Or is really, okay, we have a problem, we fix the problem, like more binary type of thing?
So it just depends on the problem that we're dealing with at the time. If we're doing everything from KM strategy to implementation within the organization, that'll be one price. If we're just looking at a particular problem set, and if I need time to research what the problem is, to interview the employees, trying to figure out what the root of the problem is. I mean, it all depends. I mean, I've done fixed price on some stuff. I've done milestone pricing on some other stuff, just to, one, kind of give the, trying to get a good concept on how the organization is, as well as giving them a good return on their investment on myself and my company.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the reason I'm asking is because if implementing all those tools cost, let's say 1.5 million, I made that up. But then the return for them is going to be an increase of productivity by 20% of all their staff. And you've got 50,000 people, then it's
right.
The return is very, very, very good. Now, how do you measure the 20% increase in productivity because you've got better access to knowledge? I mean, that's really tricky to measure, right?
It is difficult to measure. However, if for example, search is one huge thing within all organizations right now.
Yeah.
Now, being able to integrate, a single point where the organization goes in to search for items, that saves time right there. When you're saving time, you're saving dollars, especially man hours in terms of trying to find the information that they're looking for. So I'm with you in terms of the, return on investment. If they have to spend, depending on the size of the organization, though, too. I mean, the 1.5 would be a very large, investment with dealing with, search and doing knowledge management type project. When dealing with, these type of things with licensing and everything else, you're probably looking at well under $250,000, at least US, for the investment piece. For, the return on investment on that would be, at least fivefold.
All right. So
by the time you figure wages and everything else, yes.
Yeah. So you just mentioned something very interesting. One of the biggest problems right now is searching. So does it mean they don't have the tools to actually retrieve things from their own files? Like the file system is terrible. There's a really big difference in technology, and we can implement new techniques. That's something you're seeing?
So what I'm seeing is there's a lot of things that I'm seeing when it comes to that. So part of it is not being able to have a standardized meta tagging or ontology or naming convention for their documents that they have internally.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's one big issue. Two is being able to search outside their own network to find articles and stuff that would be relevant for their organization. So that's part two. And the third thing is, file folders within a portal type environment can be hazardous to one's time. By that I mean, you know, within certain environments, you know, people like putting things in folders, and I'm of the mindset of, you know, pile, not file. You can categorize, tag the information, and it makes it easier to search. It makes a lot of algorithms work a lot easier doing it that way than it is to try to file something in. I was involved with one organization that they had over 10 years worth of information on their portal site. We had to take those servers down and move them to another location. And this was over, let's see here, this was back in 2011. And we're already talking about multiple terabytes of information from this organization. And being able to find the files that they are actually needing and utilizing and everything, sometimes the actual document itself would be broken because they were going through and putting it in 12 to 20 files deep into the portal.
Interesting. So you just mentioned an organization with 10 years of archives data information. Have you ever advised a client to delete some archives and say, hey, everything is outdated, just put it here, do not open it again, it's totally outdated, it's not something you can use for the future? Have you ever said that? Impossible.
So what I've said to organizations has been, you know, the relevant information for like trends and an analysis, that type of stuff you can keep. Just make sure it's in a particular format that you can always refer back to.
Yep.
In terms of, you know, someone's leave and pass form or someone's, you know, request for whatever, you know, there's a certain lifespan for all those documents. Yep. And they were saving everything, which is a method, but you also eat up a lot of space doing it that way too.
Yeah.
I mean, a good methodology is, you know, look at whatever the document retention policy is for that particular document, and then, you know, make a record of it, make a note, and then destroy. Then that way you at least have a log of, you know, what you destroyed.
Yeah.
Within that file system. So
I guess one of the ways to find things faster is to reduce the quantity of things you have to search from, right? So if you have
Correct.
less data, obviously, I mean, it's supposed to be easier.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Cory. I do have a last question, and it's with regards to advice when it comes to, you know, finding information for yourself. And as a knowledge manager, I expect your life is very organized when it comes to knowledge. So how do you? What are the tools you're using? So you just told me before the call that you were using a note taker, AI note taker. So can you tell us more about it, and how did you start to use this tool, and if you have any other piece of advice for us to become better at managing our knowledge for our own life?
So I actually have quite a few tools up my sleeve when it comes to knowledge management. I do a lot of beta testing of different tools just so I have a better understanding. So when I come across these tools out with my clients and everything, I have a general understanding what I'm coming up against. One of the new things that I did about 5 months ago was come across a tool called Firefly.ai. And this tool is able to go onto any type of online meeting that you have. So it doesn't matter if it's Zoom, BlueJeans, Skype, Teams, whatever. It actually can capture notes for you. Depending on the package you get, it will either do just an audio recording, or if you get a better package, it would actually transcribe the information for you and store it. So this way you can go back and refer to, hey, you know, what was said during this particular meeting? So either A, you look up the audio portion of it and kind of skip through the audio piece to get to the snippet that you want, or read through the notes and actually have, the full text of that meeting.
Okay, and
which makes it really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why this tool is very, very important, because at the end, yes, with Zoom, for instance, we can record the call. It's very easy to record the call, but it's actually very difficult to utilize that, because you cannot search. Let's say it's a 2 hours video. It's very difficult to remember where you said something, right? Maybe that's at
Correct.
the end or at the beginning. So the only way to know is actually to watch the video. But now if you take this tool, firesfiles.ai, then you can actually really read very quickly, screen through the notes and say, oh yeah, that was at the end. So yeah, it's a very big time saver. Have you advised this to your client as well?
I have not yet. That's one of the things I'm hoping to get towards, is for more the meeting management side of the house, to where, especially since we're doing more things remote now because of the COVID pandemic, being able to get more meeting note takers similar to this out there and being able to utilize, because I mean, it takes time to take notes as well. And if this is sucker is doing it for you in the background, I mean, that's a time saver right there for an individual to actually, put together the minutes of the meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's pretty accurate. What's your experience dealing with this tool so far?
Actually, I like it. And I just got the basic package for right now, but I'm looking at upgrading here fairly shortly because of the number of meetings with clients and everything. I just want to make sure I capture, everything that they say. So that way, when I go back through and actually do the work, I'm actually, hey, you said on this date, I needed to do this. Here's a report because you said this.
Yeah.
So that way there's no, no questions in terms of what was said or what's being demanded of my services.
Yeah, totally understand the purpose and the interest of having this tool. All right, Cory, it was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for sharing all your insights and your opinions about knowledge management. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you.
Have a nice day.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Bye.